Welcome back to another episode of What Did the Patient Say with Doctors Dana and Lauren Brindisi, sisters and owners of Carolina Functional Neurology Center. We are bringing you inside information from real conversations we have with patients on a daily basis. We get asked the same questions and want to spread the truth on health and healing because we believe everyone deserves to know the answers.
Welcome back to another episode of What Did the Patient Say with myself, Dr. Dana, and my sister, Dr. Lauren Brindisi. Things look a little bit different this year. We're joined by our good friend and colleague, Dr. Kathryn Heidt. We're going to talk to you guys about what she does and kind of kick off 2022 with bringing you guys some more information about different aspects of functional medicine or, more holistic types of treatment that there is out who practices functional medicine. She focuses primarily on endocrinology. She works largely with women and hormones, fertility, and autoimmune diseases. It was while earning her master's in nutrition biochemistry that she realized the functional approach was the best way to help people find true, optimal, and root causes for their health. So, Dr. Kathryn.
Hey, ladies.
How are you doing today?
I am good. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks for joining us. So I think this is a great topic because, we obviously share quite a few patients. And when we talk about, functional medicine at large, we're really looking at the body as a whole. And, a lot of people who've probably never been to an endocrinologist, never heard that word, don't even really understand exactly what that means. So let's, we kind of want to break it down. And our job is why we do this podcast is just kind of put the information out there. So for people who either can't find the help or, are navigating their own health issues or, with a family member, we can make it simple enough for them so they can say like, oh, okay, I understand why I feel this way or why they feel this way or whatever. So let's start slow. What is endocrinology and then what is a hormone?
Good. So those two go together. The endocrinology is the study of the endocrine system. The endocrine system is the system in the body that makes hormones. So we have three major areas in the body that do this, one being the thyroid. So typically when I say hormones, people think PMS or, their periods and things like that, women mostly, or men are thinking low testosterone, things like that. But your hormones include your thyroid hormone. And they also include your stress hormones, such as cortisol. And so the second organ related to the endocrine system is sitting right on top of the kidneys, and that would be the adrenal glands. So a lot of people by now have heard of adrenal fatigue and this kind of stuff. I have a lot of self-diagnosed adrenal fatigue in my case histories. So everyone's like, oh, I'm so tired. I'm so run down. It's probably adrenal fatigue. And so a lot of people are kind of loosely familiar with with the endocrine system, and they don't really know that we're talking about the same thing, right? So bringing it into layman's terms, I always tell people in the office, you know what you're talking about. You know what we are talking about. You're tired. You're run down. It's hard to get up in the morning. No matter how many hours you sleep, you're tired throughout the day. A lot of that just goes right back to thyroid, the adrenals. And then the third endocrine organ is going to be the reproductive system. So in women, that would be the ovaries and the uterus. So then we're talking the hormones that most people think of when they hear hormones, which are estrogen, maybe progesterone. But by now, most people are familiar with estrogen. And so they think hormone, estrogen. But kind of zooming out from that, when I say hormones, a lot of times I'm talking about the thyroid, which can dictate a lot with the other systems. But I think that kind of talking about how we can connect patients, I'm looking for certain patterns. When I run a full thyroid panel, I'm looking for certain patterns. And there's a good number of patterns through hypothyroidism that begin in the brain. And we can't out-supplement a root cause of the brain not asking for the hormone, right? And that can go towards any of those three endocrine systems. So that's kind of the endocrine system at large. And then what is the hormone? It's what it produces. And it produces these chemicals that go throughout the entire body. And they just have a message to say at the brain, at the gut, at the toes, at the heart, in any organ at all. These hormones that are produced just have a message and they speak. Some are louder than others. Some are more problematic than others. But they're just chemicals that our bodies make that have a message.
And then obviously we don't want to forget about our guys out there, like you said, with testosterone and things like that. So the testes will produce their hormones.
Correct. I am biased. I work mostly with women. You have to remind me to bring in the men here.
Yeah. So why do you look at, like when you say endocrine system, kind of hormones at large, when you zoom out there, why is the thyroid kind of one of the biggest things that you pay attention to for any number of these issues that we're talking about? Adrenal issues, sex hormone issues, like why does that kind of the overarching thing that you pay attention to?
Well, the first thing to answer that would be that a lot of these hormone symptoms overlap. And so when people think that, let's say there's a lot of PMS or low energy or hair loss, hair thinning, a lot of people want to blame their hormones. And again, they're thinking more along the lines of the reproductive hormones, right? Testosterone, progesterone, estrogen, things like that. But a lot of that is actually overlapping with hypothyroidism. And the reason that I see that I kind of put more emphasis on the thyroid to begin with is because the mainstream system does not have adequate testing for the thyroid. They look at something called TSH and then the direct hormone produced from the thyroid, which is mostly inactive, which is T4. And you're lucky if they run a T4 usually. So usually it's the TSH, which is not, and you guys know this, the brain and body connection is just so, not working optimally like it should in most people. And there are tons of reasons for that. But that being the case, TSH is a brain hormone. So it's really not indicative a lot of times with what's truly going on with the thyroid. And so I just see a lot of missed thyroid cases where they're told your thyroid's fine, your TSH is normal. And then 3 years later, they've got the same symptoms. So maybe they look into T4. Well, maybe the thyroid's doing its job. Maybe the thyroid is making enough T4. And so, oh, you're fine, go home, you're good. And they continue to have these symptoms because they don't convert T4 to T3. And so that's a conversion issue, which now we're looking at the gut, the liver, other tissues in the body. And so to kind of bring that back to your question, I just think that there's a lot of, it's more frequent to have a missed thorough assessment of a thyroid than it is to see high or low estrogen, testosterone. More and more, we're so ready to test testosterone in the blood and be like, oh, it's low T, here's your pellets, right? Here's your replacement. And there's a reason that the body it has lower testosterone. A lot of times it's being overconverted to estrogen. And so men who are just given that, I'm trying to bring in the men more here, who are just given the testosterone replacement, if they have an overconversion issue to estrogen, and that's why their testosterone meters are dropping, what are we doing? We're just giving more testosterone. And if those mechanisms are still in place, we're still shoving estrogen. And so
which is probably the last thing they want.
The last thing they want. Yeah. Gynecomastia. A lot of more feminine type of symptoms start to come up. And so, but a lot of that goes back to the thyroid. The thyroid helps, we'll just say, stimulate reproductive hormones. It helps keep that all on track. It helps for in a women's cycle. The thyroid is critically important for a normal 28-day cycle. It's critically important for being able to track that through body temperature and all this kind of stuff. Ovulation and thyroid hormone go hand in hand. And so a lot of, we have the fertility clinics and all these specialist type things. So a lot of people are getting better care with their true sex hormones, but we're still forgetting maybe the elephant in the room. I'm still not seeing a thorough thyroid panel on any blood work that I have people show me when they first come into the office. I've yet to see it. Maybe once from another functional doctor, but that's where I kind of put the emphasis on the thyroid, is it's really just sort of a skipped or a missed diagnosis.
I heard a stat recently that the majority of miscarriages are undiagnosed thyroid problems.
Yeah. So, I actually had this conversation last night with a woman who's been trying for a year and a half. And they basically gave her a clean bill of health. She's making progesterone and she's making estrogen. And so the question is, well, IVF is your only option, just kind of deal with it. Right. And she has severe hypothyroidism. But her thyroid's actually making enough T4. She's not converting it to T3. That T3, that conversion step, is critical. If it's not happening, T3 is what nourishes and promotes growth of the placenta. So you can have sperm meets egg, fertilization, little zygote forming and grabs onto the uterine lining. But if you don't have thyroid hormone, it will not stick, so to speak, because the placenta is nourished by that thyroid hormone, by T3 specifically. And so that's where a lot of early first trimester miscarriages, I'd say there's two major reasons for that I see. One, it's sperm quality. Okay, we can't let the males off the hook. Its sperm quality is drastically changed by simple lifestyle changes on the men's part, right? And then the second is functional hypothyroidism in a female. So it's typically missed. A lot of times that T4 may be being produced and it's not being converted very well to T3, or it's then being deactivated. because of stress and inflammation and things like that. So it gets very complex as to, this whole thyroid cascade. Where is the problem? That's what we do, right? We hunt for where's the underconversion step and what are the factors that are affecting that.
I think the why is what gets missed all the time in, traditional testing and things like that. Like you're saying, like, okay, this hormone's high or this hormone's low, right? But the hormone is usually the end product, right? It's not where it started. And so then nobody's asking the question like, well, why do we have low testosterone, for example, right? Or like, where's it going? Did you produce it? Like, what happened to it once it got produced? Like, why is this happening? And I think that's where, Lauren and I talk about this all the time in terms of the brain, right? Because all the symptoms that people have and, you can't feel your toes or you're dizzy or whatever. It's like, well, why is that happening? Where's the disconnect here between, okay, we can say you have this diagnosis or we see this thing on a lab, but why? And I think that's where functional medicine at large really, fills a gap for a lot of people and does everybody a good service to kind of figure those things out. Because I think for the most part, that doesn't get answered unless you talk to somebody like yourself who's like more of a investigator to try and figure that out.
Yeah, I grew up loving puzzles. Literally, I would get obsessed and like competitive with puzzles. Okay, it was kind of weird, kind of weird, but I feel like that's kind of what we do now. Is we just dump the puzzle pieces. The first few visits with a patient. And by the way, patients out there, it can't all happen in one visit, right? We're not magicians who just know everything all of a sudden. It's over time because we were learning more about you. We're investigating, and so the analogy I make with patients is we've dumped this 1,000-piece puzzle on the table. And the early days, we're kind of building I don't know if you guys know, but you start with the outside of a puzzle. Okay. You find the corner pieces and then you build in, right?
That's a strategy.
The first few visits, we're just kind of building the outside of this and getting a clearer picture. And then we start organizing by color or shape or, that kind of stuff. And that requires us having a meter to go by, right? You're holding the box, you're going, the face is over here, the flower's over here, that kind of thing. That's data. And so a lot of the why comes from adequate testing. We don't adequately test because here's the thing. In the medical and insurance system, that's all fine and well, but if there's not truly an outcome for medication or further services or procedural type services, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to ask the question why, right? Because it's a cycle, right? If you ask the question why, it's to have an outcome. If you ask the question why and there's not a medication procedure or something that can be done, why ask the question? Right. And it's just a different perspective that we have, because when we ask the question, we're not asking it to go, oh, well, that's the answer. Have a nice day. We're going, oh, that's the answer. Now let's go after that because this is causing this. And so, when we're talking about, so on Instagram, for example, people all the time sending me messages, hey, I have this symptom. How can I fix my hormones? And I'm going, find out what's bullying your hormones. Who's punching your hormones around? Your hormones are sending a signal. They receive a message and they simply do what they're supposed to do. The message is coming from a source. We have to figure out that source. Hormones don't have choice to behave or not behave. They have a signal, and that signal, if there's a lot of it, it can make the symptom. If there's not enough of it, it can also make the symptom. But the symptom is really just your body being nice to you and saying, hey, something's going on. But just like, is complicated in every aspect of life, it's not one step back is the answer. You've got to keep digging backwards, so that we've got to find the bully in the room or in the body. What's the bully? And a lot of times it goes to gut, inflammation, stress. We so underrate the impact of stress. I think that I talk about the 90s science a lot, bad fats, low calorie diets. Like the 90s really messed up the whole last 20 years. Because another thing was that stress was kumbaya in the brain, right? Oh, think about it, you'll be fine and all that kind of stuff. No, stress is a hormone and it has a righteous message and it can just derail things in the brain, in the gut. I mean, you name it, stress, we'll call it cortisol, it is a huge problem. And it's sending that signal. And so, yeah, mindset has a lot to do with it. But if we can't regulate that cortisol, then we're whistling Dixie in a lot of what we're trying to do.
So what should people be looking out for if they have or are concerned about or might be thinking about changes in their hormones, especially like you said, That's kind of being tossed around a lot more. And people will be like, I think it's my hormones, but they don't really know what that means. I mean, what would people even be looking out for to say, maybe I should reach out to somebody like you who does more functional endocrinology and they feel like they need a little more investigating as to what's going on?
Yeah, good question. So, classically, a lot of symptoms with that in the younger categories. So let's say, late teens into the 20s, at least mid 20s. Usually it's a PMS type situation or missing cycles or super heavy periods, things like that. You really don't start to see a lot of the, oh my gosh, my hair's falling out, my skin's so dry, super major fatigue. That's more like 28 to 40 and of course 40 and above. So I think just anything that really just being intuitive, anything that just doesn't feel right? I think as women, we're kind of told, just think historically, right? Like we're, pat on the head, like, oh, what's your hormones? So we're kind of ingrained to believe that this is somehow normal, right? Hormonal is because you're female. And that's just not the case. Or, you're supposed to feel bad once you hit 40 or 50. It's just, it's menopause or early you're supposed to feel bad. Absolutely not. There's supposed to be some subtle symptoms, but it's not supposed to be this avalanche of chaos that your body has to go through. So really, I think it's just, I think to answer your question, I think it's just re-education of younger women to say, hey, don't settle for that. Your super heavy period or missing periods, that's not normal. And birth control is going to mask that potentially, but it's not your answer. So in society, I think we're just kind of conditioned to think that, oh, well, sure, if I fill out this questionnaire, I'll check every box in there. But I mean, that's because that's normal, right? So I think it's a little bit of just re-education.
And not taking, everything's fine for an answer. Like we talk about that all the time when we talk about the brain, because, so many people get MRIs and EEGs and all of this testing done. They're like, everything's fine. Like you're fine. And, I'm sure like us, the people that end up in your office are like, I knew everything wasn't fine, but they keep telling me everything's fine. So it's like when you're in that scenario, be your own advocate and find somebody that's willing to investigate what's going on, because the chances are if you're being told everything's fine and you're having some of these symptoms that we're talking about, it's not that everything's fine. It's that the tests that need to be run haven't been run. So you haven't had enough investigation to figure out actually what is causing the problem. Right. And I think a lot of people just take that word of everything's fine and they just kind of like suck it up and deal with it. And they're like, I guess this is me. Like, this is normal. Right. Yeah. Which is really sad. And I think a lot of times why we want to like bring this information to the public, because it doesn't have to be that way. It's just, to your point, if there is no medication to be given, then kind of the buck stops there. It's like, well, we could test for these things, but we don't have anything to help you at past that point. So it's like, why test for it? Or the insurance isn't going to cover it because we don't have anything to give you at that point. There's no surgery to be done. There's no medication to be had. So it's good. As far as what we can test, like, you are great.
Right. And I think the way, just kind of building on that, we don't test to look at the anatomical picture. That's what those scans are largely doing. They're not finding function. So you guys are the probably epitome of functional testing, truly, for the brain, because you're not doing all the imaging and things like that would show tumor or all that kind of stuff that you're able to see in the scans. You guys are truly testing the functionality of how the brain and the body is working. And so that is just something that it boils down to a little, I like to use the word perspective. It's just a different perspective, but once you start seeing what the functional test and the outcomes of that path are, man, there's no going back, because that's true. That's truly finding the solutions. That's truly finding the answers that people, for so long, so many people, and you guys are probably the same. By the time that a lot of people end up in our office, they're on their 10th, 20th, 40th doctor at that point, and they're just kind of defeated. You can just see it in the body language. And it's because they know something's not right, and they're scared for what the future years and decades are going to bring if they're already feeling like this in their 30s or 40s. And they're kind of scared, but they don't want to address that, that fear. But that ends up driving everything worse, because it gets into the depths of their system, that fear, that unregulated fear of, well, I think something's still wrong, even though I'm being told that it's not. So by the time that they've come to see us and we can test functionally and see and build this picture and explain and educate, there's so much validation in the patient. I mean, you just see the eyes like light up, or like tears. There's often tears, because people are just so invalidated over time. knowing that something's wrong, but they test, and it's fine, until they have this functional approach that says, oh, look, this one's not plugged in right here. Or A to B is not doing very well. So we're kind of skipping B and going to C, but B is really important, right? So it's just a lot of those kinds of things. And I think the validation in people is healing in and of itself.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. I was just having that conversation yesterday, and I feel like I have it a lot in terms of people saying, I thought this was normal, or it's just the way it is. You know, people just chalk it up because they dealt with it for so long, or they've had providers tell them that it's normal, or they've been through the gamut of the tests and everyone's saying they're fine. They're like, I guess I'm just crazy. It's all in my head. And so it is, I feel like it's a really exciting thing for us to be able to do and offer people some new information and some different testing that's been done before and just a different approach. And I just feel like there's a lot of people out there, and I know there's been so much stress over the last couple of years. So if you're not feeling good, you're feeling run down, I mean, find someone, like you guys said, that's willing to investigate and really help you out, to help you not just like survive your life, but thrive in your life. So if people feel like their hormones are imbalanced and then they, you know, go see someone, or maybe they don't, they're trying to do their own investigation, like what happens? What do they do after the testing? What types of things, kind of in general, broad spectrum, like we do, you know, a lot of neurological rehab for our patients. What are some different types of things that you do with patients to help them actually balance their hormones?
Yeah, we start with the free stuff. Just clean up your lifestyle, because, and that may seem simple, but it's very, very subtle. You know, I can throw all the supplements at you and see you once a week. I mean, we can do all that, but if you don't clean up your home, we're not getting very far, because a lot of times the insult, the bully from the outside in that's then affecting the hormones is coming from chemicals in your everyday life. So
I've got a question before you move on from that point, because we hear this all the time. And I want people to understand what this means, because you're talking about the environment, right? So we're talking about things that we're exposed to, that some of it we have control over, some of it we don't, right? Now, some of the big things we talk about is food, right? We talk about plastics. We talk about, you know, chemicals that are in our couches and our beds and all of that kind of stuff. So my only question, just so that you can tell the world so that they understand, is because what we hear all the time is people are like, well, I've always done that. I've always eaten that since I was a kid. Or, you know, I've been in this house for 20 years. That's not an issue, because it wasn't an issue 20 years ago. So what do you tell people when they tell you that?
Great point. It's called bioaccumulation. So I talk about buckets a lot. Okay. You have this gunk bucket. Okay. And you have a rim to it. And if it spills over, symptoms. But thankfully you have, so we hear detox and all this stuff online. You know, you Google detox and you got a tea and a pill and you're good to go. But our bodies detox. Our bodies do a really dang good job at detoxing. Now there's some genetics involved, right? Some people have a lower ability to detox. But basically, as we fill this junk bucket up, our body is lowering it down. Our body has the ability to do that through the liver, gallbladder, gut, microbiome. But how many people have a healthy liver, gallbladder, gut, microbiome? Not that many anymore, but it's because of all of the insults. So we're just filling this bucket up so fast, you know, faster than 50 years ago, faster than 20 years ago. The things we're putting in our bodies, breathing in, our water quality, that's been a big one for me lately, as you ladies know, but water quality is huge. You know, the chlorine in especially city waters, there's so much chlorine and sediment and things like that that's going on your skin, in your body, on your clothes. We are surrounded by so much in our environment that the goal is really just to make people conscious of it, you know, just aware of it, because a lot of people, myself included, I didn't really suspect water as a factor for some of the health issues that I was having after I moved 3 months ago, and started to realize, oh, I think it's water, but it didn't happen right away. So it's really just this consciousness, just awareness of people asking questions that they've never thought to ask, right? But it's the bioaccumulation. And so over time, our bodies are accumulating things that our bodies are able to lower back down, and then they accumulate and lower back down. But over time, those mechanisms, if we're not nourishing our bodies, if we're not providing our bodies the right tools to keep lowering those back down, in fact, we're filling it up with more things that hinder those processes happening, then this just keeps accumulating at a slow, steady rate. And decades into life, boom, spillover, right? It finally passes that threshold. And, you know, you can have your best friend or your partner or someone who's really close to you with a very similar lifestyle and environment, maybe you have the symptoms and they don't. Well, now we're talking about genetics, but we're also talking about, the nitty gritty of what's filling up your junk bucket and what's preventing your body from doing its job to lower that back down. And so it makes sense, right? Of course, over time, usually in your teens, you're feeling pretty good. 20s, typically pretty good. And then, 30s, 40s, 50s, oh my, rolls around. And it's just because of so much accumulation in our bodies. And another thing is that a lot of these toxins are fat soluble, meaning that they're attracted to the fat in the body. And so we have all these quick, weight loss programs. And oh my gosh, a lot of people doing what we do that are like, here, I can help you lose 30 pounds in a month. And I'm going, please don't. Because
then they feel terrible. They feel worse.
We call it die off and herxemia reactions. And I'm going, no, we just flooded your system with toxins that were stored for a rainy day, right? Because a lot of these toxins, heavy metals, endocrine disruptors, so the bullies in the environment that get in the body and disrupt your hormones, they're stored in fat cells. Well, unfortunately, the brain is largely fat, so that could be a factor too. But if we're, if we put someone on this super fast fat loss track or weight loss track or all the keto mamas out there, we can flood the system and retoxify. And when we retoxify, let's say a lot of that was stored in belly fat or hip fat, something like that. The body's brilliant, okay? The body knows what it was doing when you were gaining abdominal fat or hip fat. I'm not saying we shouldn't work on it. Fat has its risk factors as well. But if you lose it rapidly, it's going to go back into circulation and land in the brain, at the thyroid, at the heart, in the pancreas, at the liver. And so we're retoxifying, and now it's affecting our detox organs, right? So we can spill that right over as well. Mm-hmm. So it's really, it's quite complex. I'm not saying that it's simple, but just making people consciously aware of questioning the plastic water bottles that they're using, questioning the makeup from CVS that they're using, questioning all the Axe body spray, whatever it is. I have a 16-year-old brother and I can't stand to visit. I go walk in, I'm like, oh, good Lord, meet me outside. So, it's just, we're not educating kids on this, I remember being, you know how old I was. And I just when I first discovered, makeup, boom, I just went to the dollar store, right? I got all this cheap junk, body lotions, what is the candles,
Yankee
Bath and Body Works.
Bath and Body Works.
Oh my gosh, talk about an endocrine disruption tsunami. That's all that is. Literally, if you're walking in the mall, do a little loop around to get away from it. Nauseating. And once you become consciously aware of that headache that popped up, that wasn't out of nowhere, right? That was your body saying, whoa, run, don't
toxin overload.
Yeah. So it's just, it starts easy. Let's assess. And Dana, you said food. Obviously, that's a huge one. I work with food tremendously. My background is nutrition. So I'm very much in the diet as well. And I bio-individualize that. It's not a one diet fits all, Kale causes issues in some people, right? And maybe they can tolerate some dairy, but not kale. So it's not about good food, bad food. It's about, what's good for you, what's not. But yeah, food, the environment, the stuff you're putting on and in your body, that stuff cannot be skipped if we are working on balancing everything we've talked about.
Yeah.
So I got a question on that front, because that for people can be super overwhelming, right? So people are listening to this podcast and they're hearing what you're saying and they're like, oh man, I need an overhaul.
I got to change my water. I got to change my diet. I can't use my water bottle anymore. I got to throw it on my makeup.
Yeah.
And then I got to buy all this new stuff.
And the new stuff is expensive, higher quality stuff is pricey. So
what do you say to people there? Where do people start? Because that's the thing for us too. And I know you deal with this as well, Kathryn, is you're trying to educate people and then it's gloss over their face. Another reason we have this podcast, it's go listen to the podcast about X, and that'll help you, move from class 101 to 102. Yeah. Where do people start?
So it's strategy, and it's realistic strategy. I'd say over the last 15 years, I've been slowly working on cleaning up my lifestyle, my products, and it's an ever evolving system. People think, they look at us and they're like, oh, you guys know about this stuff. You must do all this. Hello, I was living in toxic water for 3 months, and before even realizing it. So I've addressed it now, but it's an ongoing journey, and there's never perfection. Okay. There's never perfection, and we don't expect perfection, and we don't expect rapid change either. I think I was 22 when I started to really think about, 21, 22, when I started to really think about, shampoo, stuff I'm putting on my scalp every day, conditioner, stuff like that. Well, don't do this. I stopped cold turkey, and I was like, I'm going to be one of those people who doesn't use any soap on my hair, and it's going to normalize. 3 months later, living in Alabama, it did not. And I just looked up. So don't do that. It doesn't need to be like that. There are really I know people love that story where I'm like, look, I feel you.
Awesome.
I didn't know what to do. I was still learning what to do. What are the clean products? Because you also say clean products, and it's like, what does that even mean, right? That we can't really get on to today. We're probably at our time point anyways, but I give people a list of the top endocrine disruptors, or I give them resources at least to go read. Beauty Counter has a whole list of things. Now they're way they're way involved with like, look at these hundreds of things, and I'm like, let's pick the top 10 to address, right? And a lot of companies.
And for people that don't know, Beauty Counter's makeup, right?
It's makeup. Yep, it's got a lot of makeup. So I suggest a few companies, and I'm not affiliated with companies, but I suggest a few companies of these have better products. So maybe the things, truthfully, I have a system. We itemize either room by room or topic. Topic seems to be easier for people because it's like, all right, let's first and foremost simply address what you're drinking out of. Get rid of your plastics, period. Get rid of your plastics. Plastic Tupperware. My fiance and I, 2 years ago, I was like, so listen, if we're going to work out, all this Tupperware is got to go. And so we just like did huge, he had all this Tupperware. So just this Goodwill dump. And I had a lot of the stainless steel and stuff like that. And we've just kind of gone in that direction, and glass and everything. So stainless steel, glass, ceramic typically are safer. And then, okay, so that's what you're drinking out of. What's the next topic? What's something that you use a lot? Deodorant. All right, let's work on just deodorant. Give yourself a week, give yourself a month, however long it needs to be. There's no rush to this, okay? Because it can be very overwhelming, and it just doesn't need to be. This needs to be fun. This needs to be something that's exciting. Oh my gosh, look at all this potential opportunity, as opposed to, oh my gosh, I have to do this. The mindset of it is what's critically important too, is, oh my gosh, I get to look at these newer things and wow, I've never read about this company and this kind of stuff. So I'm going to try this, as opposed to I have to leave this stuff behind. This stuff's making you sick, girl. What you doing? Like, why are you craving the stuff that's been giving you the symptoms that you're paying me to address? You know what I mean? Like, we could start in the home. So another topic is makeup, which gets very complex for some people and very simple for others. So we just kind of go item by item, topic by topic.
Yeah, I like that. And I feel like that's kind of where, just the topic of even just how our brains work. And I talk about this with patients all day long in terms of our brain's just a bunch of habits. So we become very efficient at doing the things we do the most often. Mm-hmm. So when you're trying to change your lifestyle, just like you said, I'm always like, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And it's going to take effort, especially at first, because it's not a habit yet, right? You're trying to fire these new pathways that you're not used to doing. You just have these automatics, right? We even look at marketing and how they look at neuroscience and study how people take in the information and get hooked on it. So then you're hooked on these certain products because now it's just become a habit for you to do that. Yeah. But yes, starting somewhere, and it's don't get overwhelmed by the big picture.
Yeah, exactly.
Look at this, like
having someone to guide you, right? It's very difficult to do that stuff on your own. It's like you said, it's overwhelming. There's so much information out there. You're being fed the information a lot of times that you want to hear and see. So, having somebody, Kathryn, that can help them do that, with strategy and purpose is super important. We got to kind of wrap up our chat here, and I'm sure we'll be doing this again in the future, because obviously we've got a lot to say and a lot to talk about. I think it would be great to maybe do another one of these and maybe talk a little bit more specifically about some of those things, like, okay, what products, what companies, like, what do we clean up in our kitchen first? Like, I think that would be a cool thing for people to have easy access to. But Kathryn, if people want to find you, learn more about what you do, make an appointment with you, how do they do that?
The easiest way is to go to my website, and at the very top, you can book a discovery call right there. That's the first way to just get on my schedule. We have a conversation, kind of do a screening effort of what should the next step look like before we just have you in the office. So discovery call is the way to go with me. And the website is drkathrynnheidt.com. So DR and kathrynnheidt.com. And yeah, just book a discovery call would be the best way to go.
That's great. And they can find you on Instagram, Facebook.
And Instagram as well. Oh yeah.
Cool.
Yep. And it's awesome. Just Dr. _Heidt on Instagram. So
great.
Great.
Well, thank you so much for this.
Yeah,
This was very
thank you.
informative, and I'm sure we'll have questions from people after this episode for sure. So hopefully we can have you back at a later date. And as always, thank you guys for listening. Welcome back to What Did the Patient Say for 2022. Like we always say, you guys are driving these videos, and we want to bring you the information that you need. So comment, like, subscribe to our channels, and let us know if you have any questions, and we will do our best to answer them. Thank you.